Hey, how are you doing, everybody, and welcome into another episode of Early Waiver Wire Targets here for Week 14 action. This is quite possibly the final regular season game for mostly all of our leagues out there. Some of you guys may have Week 15 as a late regular season contest as you get into a fantasy playoff schedule that might end in Week 18. However, for the majority of leagues out there, this is it. It's do or die for a lot of teams that are on the cusp of playoff contention. So hopefully some of the names in today's episode can be contributors to lineups next week and help you all go out and make that final push. But today is Monday. That means on Monday night here this evening, if you're watching this episode the day it comes out, we've got Monday Night Football. I cannot wait for the game tonight. It's a very good one between the Buffalo Bills and the New England Patriots. That means we've got a prop bet brought to you guys by ThriveFantasy.com. Here is my prop for this evening. We've got a 3-leg contest this time around. There's a good chance we see some snow in tonight's outing, or at least that's the forecast as we approach that game. If that's the case, I really like the odds of the Patriots' strong offensive line holding things together and then having, things slow down in the snow. The pass rush isn't able to be quite as effective. And for a team like the Patriots, both the Bills and the Patriots are accustomed to playing in some tougher weather conditions. But 205.5 for Mac Jones' yardage seems like something I think he can very well go over. In turn, I like Jacoby Myers going over on his yards. And then Dawson Knox. I think that the Pats are going to make a strong effort to contain Stephon Diggs. And in turn, I think Knox is that other guy we've been seeing Josh Allen really go to. Now, he's been typically used in the red zone, but I think he can certainly get over that 31-yard marker. So that's my prop. Go check out ThriveFantasy.com. When you deposit $10 or more using promo code SIZZLE, they will give you a 100% deposit match bonus up to $100. That means if you put $100 in your Thrive Fantasy account with promo code SIZZLE, you get $100 for free. In addition to that, you'll also get a free month of SFS Gold, where I'll set your lineups for you as a thank you for going and checking them out. So, waiver wire targets, that's the name of the game for today's episode. Can't wait for Monday Night Football. Go check out Thrive Fantasy. But let's hit the intro, not waste any more time, and get into today's episode. All right, here we go. So my first ad for this week's action has got to be Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. He is hopefully going to remain the starter moving forward here. The reason I say hopefully is due to the fact that he did throw 4 interceptions last week. However, that's not my main reason for concern here. He has a condition or an injury diagnosed and classified as mallet finger, which is very similar to the injury that Russell Wilson sustained and kept him out of games. Now, Taysom Hill's injury is not expected to be as severe as Russell Wilson's, and there is the expectation that he will hopefully be available on a longer week here, as the Saints played on Thursday this past week in Week 13. So they're optimistic that he'll be available for Week 14's game. It's not a guarantee, though, so you'll have to keep your eye on this one going forward. But as I said, 4 interceptions. If this mallet finger diagnosis is something that's going to bother him and bug him moving forward, there's a chance we might not see him play the quarterback role for this team. There's a chance Sean Payton goes back to Trevor Siemian and Taysom returns to more of his gadget role for this offense. However, he was a very effective rusher on the ground. He had 11 carries for 101 yards, still had 20 fantasy points against the Dallas Cowboys last week on Thursday Night Football, despite the 4 interceptions. So there's a very real and present fantasy value for Taysom Hill when he's in your lineups, despite the fact that he might not actually be the most competent NFL quarterback and is more of a rich man's Tim Tebow. I mean, he does a lot of things with his legs, but his actual passing capabilities are not all that advanced, and they're not all that refined in terms of some other true NFL passers. So that doesn't mean Taysom can't be a very valuable quarterback in fantasy leagues, though. He actually is probably more valuable than some other legitimate NFL quarterbacks because of the value he provides with his legs. So keep your eyes on Taysom Hill. He's definitely my top quarterback waiver wire ad for this week. Again, under the assumption that he'll be the team's starting quarterback here in Week 14. However, that is certainly not a guarantee when you factor in health and then the productivity that he had after that injury was sustained to his finger. He may not be able to function at a high enough level to earn that starting job for this week's game. So keep your eye on Taysom Hill. However, he is a very valuable fantasy asset when he's in the lineup. KJ Osborn, probably one of the best non-quarterback ads for this week. coming off the fact that Adam Thielen sprained his ankle and was forced and ruled out eventually of the contest against the Detroit Lions. KJ Osborn has made some plays throughout the season. He's had some very respectable fantasy outings. However, as the number 3 in this Vikings offense, he's never really been able to get it going on a consistent basis. If Adam Thielen is to miss time, though, that makes KJ Osborn a potentially flex-worthy play and a guy who could see a lot more passes heading his direction, as he's actually shown, again, some playmaking ability, and Kirk Cousins has some trust in him. He caught 4 of his 7 targets, did score a touchdown. So, again, you've got some things rolling in the right direction. Let's see if Adam Thielen's health and how that sprained ankle plays out the rest of this week. There's a chance that Thielen's ready to go. It's not something too significant, and that he's able to not miss any time. However, if that's not the case, if Adam Thielen is absent even a week or two, KJ Osborn would immediately become a much more favorable lineup option. DeVante Parker for the Miami Dolphins, another name to keep your eye on here. He's a little bit more roster than the other names you'll see on this list. KJ Osborn, by the way, is barely owned in more than 4% of ESPN leagues, so a lot of availability for him to be added. But DeVante Parker this week is owned in over 50% of leagues. However, with his injuries throughout this season, he's been dropped a lot, so he's a lot more widely available for teams to pick up. He did have 5 grabs for 62 yards. He had a really impressive sideline grab. He's a jump ball playmaker for this Dolphins offense. He's another, I don't want to compare him to a Mike Gesicki because they're two different positions, obviously, although Mike Gesicki is a very athletic pass-catching tight end. But they play a very similar role in that they aren't the best separators. However, they do go up and make those, again, contested grabs, and they win more often than not those jump ball situations when the defender is in near coverage. So Parker gives you an opportunity to, again, make plays downfield, catch passes in the red zone, and use that vertical ability to his advantage in that area of the field. I would assess him as a decent flex option down the stretch of this season. I think he'll have some matchups that are advantageous for us. However, he's probably not a weekly must start. And at the end of the day, this list overall is a little bit more despair than usual, as we see the true fantasy players have been picked up and added, and we've really figured out who those stronger options are going to be. Last week was a great week for waiver wire adds, as we had a lot of running backs go down. But with that dust kind of settling here, there's a lot less opportunities for us to get long-term difference makers. I would say that these 3 players to start off the list for today's episode are probably about as good as it gets until the final 2 names on today's video, and we'll see how you ultimately went out and assessed those guys, as they did make last week's episode as well. Sony Michel for the Rams is another add to target here. The reason that I don't see Sony Michel being a long-term difference maker for this offense is the fact that Darrell Henderson was active for this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I feel that it was more of a precautionary situation where Sony Michel in the first half of the game took every snap at the running back position for the Rams, and with Henderson's sore quad, they were just being very cautious in their approach to how they are using their starting 3-down back, who is getting the bulk of the carries in this offense every week, basically. Just some opportunity to rest, and against an opponent who wasn't very formidable, the Rams won 37-7. They ultimately were trying to rest him up and get him back to 100% for their playoff push, which they're hoping to make down the stretch of this season. So Sony Michel came in, filled in very well in Henderson's absence. However, I find it unlikely that we'll see Michel factored into the offense at this rate going forward, because of the fact that, again, Henderson was able to suit up for this matchup. I just think that you're not looking at a extended period of missed games for him, barring a setback in practice this week, which is, of course, possible, which means Sony Michel has some value. If you're a Henderson owner and have some space at the bottom of your bench, I would certainly suggest a handcuff option for you. Kenneth Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles, this was one that was very interesting to watch this week. He was a great check down option for Gardner Minshew in the passing game. It was really fun to watch Gardner Minshew this week come out there and actually have some success throwing the football downfield. Dallas Goedert had himself a heck of a game, particularly in the first half. And Gainwell, who's only owned in 11% of leagues, had 87 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. 5 receptions, or of that production, 5 receptions resulted in 33 yards for him. They do have a Week 14 bye here, so that's something to note. You're not going to be able to get any utility out of him this coming week. However, we'll see how. I expect Jalen Hurts to be back after the bye. That's an important fact or detail number 1 here. That's definitely not a fact. We'll see how he's able to progress back through that injury, and whether or not I don't think the coaching staff is going to make a drastic change here to the starter at the position. However, Gardner did play very well in that first start with the Philadelphia Eagles. Nonetheless, Kenneth Gainwell in PPR leagues has some interesting value here. Miles Sanders got nicked up at the end of that game and ended up leaving. He went to the medical tent. So once we hear more on that injury news, we'll obviously get back to you guys about that and fill you in on the details, because that will potentially make Kenneth Gainwell that much more of an attractive waiver wire ad for this week. But for the time being, he's just a really nice, useful back in this offense, in particular in our PPR leagues, because of his pass catching upside. And he's not a 3-down player. This isn't a guy who's going to be on the field for all situations of a football game, but he is going to be out there on those passing downs. He's a far better receiving back than Miles Sanders is. And again, he did score it in the end zone for a touchdown. So you will find an opportunity for him to potentially give you points in that facet of things. This is a lower end flex play, but again, in those PPR leagues, if he potentially increases his snap percentage here as the weeks move forward, they've got themselves a handful of NFC East opponents down the stretch of this season. Those could be games in which he finds some very nice quality production. Russell Gage, this might be one where he fits in with the class of players at the top of today's episode. He did a very good job against Tampa Bay. 11 catches on 12 targets and 130 yards. He's the number one wide receiver in this offense right now without without Calvin Ridley on the field. He's an underrated player. I expected him in draft season to do these type of things from day one till now and not necessarily be a 100-plus yard receiver every week. But seeing his involvement in this offense in 2020, and with the departure of Julio Jones, I penciled in Russell Gage to absorb a healthy chunk of that production and to still be a fantasy relevant player in cohesion with a Kyle Pitts and with a Calvin Ridley. However, this offense has shaped out a lot more differently than how we projected it at the start of the year. I don't think anyone had Cordero Patterson penciled in for the type of role he's seeing with this team right now. But Russell Gage is starting to find himself here. Him and Matt Ryan are starting to connect more and more week after week. And if they continue to put up this level of production, I mean, getting double-digit targets at the wide receiver position is great for any player. And Russell Gage can run some routes. He can get out there and separate from defensive backs. He's not the most elite or electric player at the wide receiver position, but he's got some game to him here. I like what he can do down the stretch. I think that Matty Ice is still a competent NFL quarterback as long as that offensive line can pass protect for him. He's made some really great plays this season. He's had some really good games. I think that they can stack this success upon itself here. And moving forward, you can look at Russell Gage again as one of those flex level players, especially in those PPR leagues. He's not a red zone monster, but he's a player who can get open, catch passes, and get the job done at the end of the day. Moving along now with Tevin Coleman of the New York Jets. This is one where I don't find you're going to get too much flash with Tevin Coleman. However, in the short term, you are getting a team starting running back. That's somewhat valuable in itself. Tevin did get a couple of goal line opportunities against the Eagles. However, he wasn't able to cash in. He wasn't able to break a couple tackles on the goal line and punch those in for 6. But again, you are getting a team starting NFL running back in the short term. He's not going to give you too many yards from scrimmage. He is going to be used decently. You're looking at between 12 and 15 touches per game right now because Ty Johnson's still factored in there a little bit. And with Michael Carter potentially being out another game, who knows, maybe a little bit more than that, but at least one more game for Michael Carter this season, you're going to get one potential game of utility out of Tevin Coleman if you're one of those teams in a very desperate and dire RB situation. That at least makes Tevin Coleman an option worth looking at for this week. Cam Newton for the Carolina Panthers. Now, a lot of people are scared off of Cam Newton, and a lot of people are backing off of him. I totally understand it. He looked awful prior to the bye week in that game against the Dolphins, where he started out strong. However, he passed terribly throughout the duration of that contest, had less than 100 yards through the air, got benched, had 2 interceptions. I get all of that. However, if you're looking for a strong Week 14 streamer, Cam Newton is a potential name to keep your eye on here. He's got the Falcons this week. It's a division matchup. However, look at what the Buccaneers and Tom Brady did this week against the Falcons. They didn't really want to run the ball all that much because that is, if there was such a thing, the strength of this Falcons defense. Rather, TB12 in that Bucs offense dropped back and threw all over the yard for 4 quarters. And when you look at Cam Newton and the rushing upside he brings to the table, you've also got yourself some respectable receiving assets. you've got yourself DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson who can stretch the field against that group, you might be able to find some functional utility here and have a Taysom Hill level performance where, maybe Cam doesn't get into triple figures in terms of breaking the 100 yardage marker in the rushing department, but maybe he gets a couple goal line carries. You don't have Christian McCaffrey anymore, so I think Cam Newton is honestly one of your most versatile rushing threats in this offense. It's not expected that he's going to get benched for P.J. Walker this week. Matt Rule said ahead of the bye week that they weren't looking to make a quarterback change at that time. I think there is some lineup utility for Cam here again in the short term. One game, if you're in need of a quarterback, Cam Newton could be a steady option for you here in Week 14. And then the last two names here, numbers 9 and 10 on the list for today. Don't forget about Deontay Foreman, and Dontrell Hilliard, who we'll talk about in just a second. This is a semi-committee level backfield. However, the Titans are still very committed to running the football. Until they get Derrick Henry back, these are the two top dogs. Adrian Peterson is now a Seahawk, as funny as that was. He was with the team for, one game, then was released and sent on over to Seattle, where he scored another touchdown. So AP is Mr. Goal Line touches now. But Deontay Foreman, 19 touches, 109 yards on the ground against the New England Patriots. And then Dontrell Hilliard here, he had 12 carries, 131 yards, including a 60-plus yard touchdown run. These are two just valuable players to have, whether they're stashed on your bench or filling in for injured running backs or whatever the case might be. They're at least worth a roster spot here down the stretch because you can never have enough depth at the running back position. Alrighty, those were my 10 early waiver wire ads for Week 14 action. Again, remember to go check out Thrive Fantasy, sign up with promo code SIZZLE, and deposit between $10 and $100. And whatever you put in up to that $100 increment, they will match you that number and then let me know you signed up. And once you've played a contest, they'll let me know, and I'll give you guys a month of free SFS Gold, which includes my weekly lineup advice and answering all your personal questions on a weekly basis. Again, for going over and checking them out, supporting their stuff over there. It's a great time. I love their prop bet section. It's my favorite thing personally on their site, and they've got some other functional contests as well that are very fun to play and go out and compete against other fantasy players. So thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode where I'll be posting, or 2 episodes rather, where I'll be posting my league-winning running backs and wide receivers after watching Week 13 action and breaking down how I evaluate and assess this week's game. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys have questions, drop those down in the comment section below. And as always, make sure to leave this video with a like and click that subscribe button. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.